Thank you for joining us for our April 2023 Q&A talk. I'm tonight's host, Q&A Talks Program Coordinator Cody McRae-Cullum. My personal pronouns are he, him, but if you are feeling bold, feel free to address me with my preferred pronoun, the royal we. I'm so overjoyed to be speaking tonight with a good friend of the Project Q&A community, Miss Hilah. Q&A Talks connect rural parents and caregivers of LGBTQIA plus youth with the resources they need to ensure their children can grow up safe and authentically. Q&A Talks is an initiative of Project Q&A and is made possible by grants from the Independence Area Community Chest and the American Library Association's Libraries Transform Communities focus on rural and small library grant in partnership with the Independence Public Library. Tonight, we are pleased to have Miss Hilah. Miss Hilah, licensed Master of Social Work, has around 14 years of experience in the mental health field, and in addition to her LMSW, has earned 2 bachelor's degrees in psychology and women's studies. Miss Hilah's personal pronouns are she, her, and she is a queer cis woman. Please welcome Miss Hilah.
Hi, I need to go close my window apparently. Hold on.
You're good.
There's a storm coming tonight.
Oh my, you're good.
All right. So, yeah, I guess I'll start. It's weird. This is my first time doing this since I haven't done a presentation since like grad school, which was 8 years ago now. So, yeah. All right. So, the thing I'm talking about today is kind of basically mental health, adolescents, LGBTQ adolescents and mental health, kind of combining 3 of my favorite things, which is mental health, LGBTQ issues, and analyzing other people's social studies and why they are wrong about things. The big phrase that's going to kind of be the thing I quote a lot in this one is correlation does not equal causation. So just because we see numbers that report or that connect to things does not mean that they are one causes the other or vice versa. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is kind of a story, because I feel like stories are good ways to start about things. So I'm going to start with kind of a sad story. It's about Christine Daniels. I don't know if many people have heard of her. Christine Daniels was born Mike Pinner, was a sports writer, and in 2008 or 2007, she announced that she was going to live her life, her truth, and transition, and went on vacation for work, came back as Christine Daniels. A quote that she said that I like is, a transgender friend provided the best and simplest explanation I have heard. We are born with this, we fight it as long as we can, and in the end, it wins. I gave it as good a fight as I possibly could. I went more than 40 hard rounds with it. Eventually, though, you realize you are only fighting yourself and your happiness and your mental health. A no-win situation any way you look at it. So Christine began their process of transitioning, and it was incredibly hard for her, as one is to expect, being a woman in a male-dominated, not just a trans woman, but a woman in general, in a male-dominated field, being kind of thrust into a position of being a spokesperson for trans rights, whether they wanted to be or not, didn't really get an option. And one of the biggest things was also her wife divorced her. And it was not an easy divorce. So in October of 2008, Christine made the decision to detransition and began living again as Mike. And in November of 2009, she completed suicide. And there were a lot of different issues at this point, but this is a quote from an article, says, although many issues were at play at this point, one stood out. Pinner was repeatedly told friends his return to a male lifestyle was a last-ditch effort to reunite with his wife in some way. That's the quotes pronouns. Basically just sort of driving home the point that her decision was based more on trying to go back, basically just that being treated like a trans woman in our society was so hard for her that she tried to go back to living a lie and not who she was, and that basically reached a point where she couldn't handle it and committed suicide. So the reason I talk about that is because this comes up a lot, LGBT suicide rates, especially in adolescents, right? And according to the Trevor Project, the adolescent suicide rate is 4 times that of their peers. Well, which also often gets highlighted when people talk about all of this legislation and stuff, about why we need to separate sports, or why we need to, all this stuff that is, it's for the children's mental health, right? Because they commit suicide rates 4 times their peers. The studies that are being done, and the one I am looking at today too, is called Families Matter. And basically what they found is the importance of family support. LGBT youth who have family support have the lowest rates of distress, emotional, psychological distress. Youth who lack family support, but who have other forms of support, whether it be through school, through peers, through church communities, whatever other sort of place they can go for with stress, have a decrease in psychological distress. And actually it has found that a lot of them over time get an increase in their family support as well. Youth who have low forms of support across the board will have high distress. So we see this increased suicide rate in adolescents who are LGBT because of how they are treated, not because they are LGBT. When you look and compare spaces where kids report being treated and being supported in the same way as their straight and cisgender peers, there's still suicide because it's adolescents, but the suicide rate is more in line with the rate of the rest of their peers. So basically, being LGBTQ does not lead kids to commit suicide. Rather, it leads kids to being rejected by the people who are supposed to love them, and not having a support is what leads to suicide, which is kind of a thing we also know in general. A lot of times people who feel like they don't have support, or who feel like they're not being supported in a way, are more likely to commit suicide. We also can see this in the rates of kids who have experienced various traumas, LGBT, we kind of see the same thing in the LGBT rates of addiction. Largely comes from, once again, feeling rejected, feeling, othered, leading to once again, traumas, and 2, feeling unsupportive and feeling like, well, this is just going to be how I handle it, right? Because when you're 14 and you're anxious constantly, and then you get drunk and now you're not anxious, oh my God, then drinking starts becoming your solution to your anxiety, and it goes on and on. And so that's also why we do actually tend to see a higher rate of addiction in LGBT adults than we do in the general population. If I had thought ahead, I would have looked up to see if that is going down. I think it might be, but yeah, that's also why there's a lot of resources, LGBT specific kind of addiction resources. So there's NAs and AA meetings that are specifically for members of the queer community. So Cody, is there a way I can share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Alt S.
Okay. Nope, that didn't let me do that. When I tried to share it, it says that you disabled it.
I'll fix that right away, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while they are doing that, I'm going to discuss the thing that kind of inspired me to want to do this specific topic, besides my love of insulting other people's.
You should be able to share your screen now, Miss Hilah.
It's rapid onset gender dysphoria theory. You'll notice that I put theory in quotation marks. Right. We see this one a lot in the concept of it's just a phase or it's a fad. We hear that one a lot lately too, as more people are coming out as trans and non-binary. But you're not really that way. You're just like that because you're friends. So rapid onset gender dysphoria is a term that was developed by people who did a survey. And the idea behind it is that trans youth are only doing so because of peer influence. They don't really understand what they're doing, or they're doing it for all those great benefits that come from being trans. So here's the thing though, right? So the survey that was done, where this idea came from, is a survey that was completed on parents and asking parents what they thought was the cause of their children's reporting being trans or their gender dysphoria. So not really, that's not really how that works. That's how we end up with things like the idea that being a runaway slave is a mental illness, right? Because we asked the slave masters and they couldn't understand why these slaves wanted to run away. Must be because they're crazy. Same thing, right? These kids whose gender identity I don't understand clearly must be having something else going on. So evidence has supported the opposite. Have these so one of the arguments they had was that kids did it because they felt that they would be more accepted by their peers if they were trans over being gay. And I'm sure all of you are surprised to find out that that is not true. Showing the rates of school bullying, you can see here, school bullying and online bullying, right? Transgender, and I like this phrase, and gender diverse. Transgender and gender diverse kids, right, have if you guys don't know much about studies, the smaller the one is, the better. You have the P factor. So this is a 0.001, which is really good. Generally, a 0.1 is considered acceptable, and a 0.01 is what you're going to want to have before you publish a study. So a 0.001 is pretty good. So cisgendered sexual minority, aka bisexual, lesbian, gay, pansexual, whatever they identified as, adolescents who are still cisgender report rates of school bullying that are still pretty high, especially when we compare to, I did this backwards, heterosexual compared to homosexual, right? So in 2013 and in 2019, we see that cisgender minority students are being bullied at twice the rate, roughly, give or take a little bit, as their cisgendered heterosexual peers. There's a bit, you can see there's a little bit of a decrease since in the past, 2 years. So that's good. That's hopefully a trend that will continue. But when we compare it to their cisgendered peers to the transgender and gender diverse peers, you'll see a really, especially now, an even greater disparity than there used to be. So, they're experiencing, right, the amount of school bullying in 2017 that they were experiencing, cisgendered, sexual minority, and transgender and gender diverse students were obviously more towards the transgender and gender diverse students, but not as much of a difference as you see, 30% versus 38. And then in 2019, we're seeing 28% versus 45%. So the idea that these students are identifying as transgender and gender diverse for social clout is not true. The study also found that students who are identifying as transgender and gender diverse have a better understanding of what that means and are better able to explain what gender and sexuality mean compared to others. So it's not that they don't know what they're talking about. In fact, they are more educated and more informed. If you want to look this up, it was published in the Pediatrics. The title is Sex Assigned at Birth Ratio, because one of the arguments they had was that assigned female at birth, AFAB students, are reporting transgender identities at higher rates than assigned male at birth students. The idea, I think, being just that it is harder to be a woman. Well, once again, going back to correlation doesn't equal causation. We don't know if there is a slightly higher rate of AFAB students who identify as transgender, but we can't tell for sure if that is, there's no evidence to support that it's obviously related to the social aspect, like they say here. There's a high likelihood that it is related to the fact that we live in a patriarchal society, and in broad senses, trans men tend to have a little bit of an easier time than trans women. Trans men don't get murdered at the rates of trans women. They don't have to deal with, so it's more kind of, if you think about it, it's more socially acceptable to be a tomboy than it is to be, a sissy or whatever. So it's possible that we see slightly more AFAB because they feel it's safer and more comfortable coming out. So the quote on here that is also kind of an important one is, the notion of ROGD has been used by legislators to prohibit trans and gender diverse youth from accessing gender affirming medical care, despite the considerable methodological limitations underlying the generation of this hypothesis. AKA, you did a survey on a bunch of parents and they told you what they thought, and we're going to run with it rather than talking to the actual kids who are experiencing this. And as well as the unequivocal support of gender affirming medical care by multiple major medical organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the American Psychiatric Association, also the American Psychological Association. Basically, you're looking at, we have one group of parents and politicians who say one thing based on a survey that was done that didn't even directly ask the people involved what their thoughts and their feelings were. And we have another statement, another plan of action that is being put forth by multiple medical associations, almost every person who works with that population, almost every member of that population, and basically the overwhelming evidence that stands up to scrutiny, saying medical affirming care and gender affirming care is consistently going to be what is best for the person. I'm going to tell you a little secret. The fact that Gender dysphoria is in the DSM as a mental health issue, which people often bring up. Largely, it's in there for insurance reasons, because we can't bill if you don't have a diagnosis. And so if we can't bill, we can't get paid. So gender dysphoria is a diagnosis we can give. Often it goes along with depression, PTSD, and all these other ones, but yeah, it is a diagnosis that we can give that allows us to continue to see a client. It also means that you can get, depending on your insurance, gender affirming surgeries, medication, hormone replacement therapy, all of that will be covered by your insurance. And one of my favorite things is people who use that as an excuse, who they say, oh, but it's a mental health, it's in the DSM. But if you go, well, have you read the DSM, right? Most of them have not, because most people don't read the DSM for fun. I do. And the recommendation for helping somebody in moving and caring for their gender dysphoria is affirmative support. So calling them by their preferred pronouns, calling them by their preferred name, helping them with, allowing them and encouraging them to dress in the way that they choose to express themselves. So even if it is a mental illness, consistently the treatment for said mental illness is allowing the person to live their life the way they would like to. And then to also address my favorite little frustration thing that people talk about is the idea that kids should not have any kind of medical intervention because they're going to regret it, right? One thing is prepubescent patients who are transgender or gender diverse do not receive any medical interventions. There's really no need to at that age. If you are an 8-year-old boy who is trans and feels as though you're an 8-year-old girl, there's no medical intervention that's going to be done, right? It just comes down to sociological things. Parents allowing you to have your long hair, letting you dress the way that you are supposed to, or you want to, getting you involved with sports, therapy, things like that. Pubescent, I don't know why this is doing, why it doesn't like me all of a sudden. Pubescent patients are eligible for one thing, and that is called puberty suppressants. Puberty suppressants were approved for use by the FDA in 1993, and the effects of them are reversible. They were established and they were created for use of, well, basically what's called peri-onset puberty, which just means that a kid is going through puberty too early. We feel like this kid is going through puberty too early. Can happen for a variety of reasons. Early onset puberty is actually connected to trauma as well, specifically sexual trauma, but that is another thing for me to rant about later on. But also just various hormonal and genetic disorders that can cause people to begin developing puberty when they are very, very young. So the thing about the medications is if you stop taking them, you will right back into puberty. So if you are a cis female who takes puberty suppressants for whatever reason you want to, and then decide to stop, you will begin to develop breast tissue, you will develop a widening of your hips, you will develop all of those secondary sex characteristics that are associated with estrogen. Same thing if you are, if you are cis male or assigned male at birth and you stop taking the puberty suppressants, your voice will drop, your testicles will drop, all of those things. So one of the things too that was very interesting is among 720 people who started puberty suppressing hormones prior to the age of 18, 704, which is 98%, continued using gender affirming hormones after turning 18. Here's where this is kind of interesting. So that's right, 2% who did not. This was a study that was done in the University of Amsterdam. A study that was done on the kids in the US found that only 7.3% of transgender kids altered their gender identification or retransitioned over a 5-year follow-up period. Of this group, only 0.5 of those who transitioned at age 6 or older retransitioned. So you'll notice though, right, 2% in Amsterdam, 7.3% in America, right, which goes back to that conversation of a lot of it is really more about support and being treated with respect and being able to have others to support you. You know, Amsterdam, Netherlands have a lot better social programs that provide a lot more social support, and that can be more affirming than what is provided here in the US. So seeing a higher rate of people in the US choose to detransition over those in a more accepting society is kind of what we would expect to see. One of the things that I also thought was interesting in the study that I had read, I can't remember if it was this one or if it was another one, they did where they asked kids kids who chose to take puberty suppressants, why they chose to take it. And one of the things that came back from the kids who had taken the puberty suppressants and ultimately decided to stop it and return to or identifying as their gender assigned at birth, almost all of them said they were grateful for it. They were grateful for having the opportunity to take the puberty suppressant and have some time to figure out who they are and what they wanted and what their identity was. Because like I said, it doesn't stop puberty, it pauses puberty. So they were, most of the kids who continued on with their gender affirming care said, yeah, I see why that's beneficial. I mean, that's not why I did it, but I can see where that would be beneficial to someone. So, that's just the basic thing is, right, so all this legislation that we are seeing being passed, unfortunately, like the Trevor Project, the four times amount of suicide in adolescents, we should be prepared to see that going up. If all of these bills are getting passed, if kids are being reported to the state of Missouri, as is apparently now a thing we can do, we should expect to see this mental health crisis become significantly worse, as if we are not pushing back against it and we are not fighting against it, and we are not telling them to stand down. That's kind of all the presentation I prepared because I expected myself to go off on way more tangents than I did.
No worries, no worries. I'm gonna go ahead and
Yep, you muted yourself.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and send out the invite in case anyone wants to join the Q&A session. And thank you so much, Ms. Hilah. That was a great presentation, very informative and well-informed, and I do appreciate that. So in just a moment, we'll see if anyone else has a question in the Facebook chat, then we'll close out the live stream and continue with the Q&A session on Zoom.
Cedric, do you have a question? My cat is sitting next to me in the cat bed, and he has been an active participant in this conversation.
Oh, wonderful.
He's just occasionally reached out to me and put his paw on me to go, hey.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm here. I see you, buddy.
Yeah.
I had to get a cat bed during COVID because I would do groups and he would want to be in the middle of groups. So
right. Gotta be involved, right?
Yeah. Give him a little bed and now he's not as involved.
All right. Thank you to all who tuned in and our partners at the Independence Public Library and our funding sources, the Independence Area Community Chest and the American Library Association. Thank you to Ms. Hilah for a wonderful presentation. If you would like to continue the conversation with Ms. Hilah on Zoom, follow the link in the comments section. Be sure to tune in next month for Q&A talks. We are still working on getting that speaker scheduled. It will be held on Wednesday, 17th of May, 2023 at 7 p.m. rather. And we have not yet hammered down the discussion topic, but I'm sure it'll be a great time. If you would like to find out more about Project Q&A, our work, or to view past Q&A talks, please visit our website and follow us on social media. To support the work we are doing in rural communities, please consider making a tax-deductible donation today. Thank you for watching our Q&A talk for the month of April 2023. If you have any questions for our presenter, please follow the link in the comments. Thank you and have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you, Ms. Hilah.